I paid $20 for this.
I'm gonna be honest. I struggled with this one. I have a complex and weird relationship with this game. I had learned of this game from the Steam Discovery queue, and it just looked bad. It looked terrible. It didn't even look like a real playable game. And I have to admit that curiosity got the better of me, so I went ahead, bought it, played it, and immediately returned it. There was nothing of value here for me, and I don't know what I expected going into it. It was nothing more than a highly elaborate meme, and I had just walked right into it. However, something about it kept pulling me back, and time again, I found myself at the game's Steam page. Thousands of reviews and an overwhelmingly positive rating. This game had a hold on me. There had to be something more. So, I bought it again, and what I found was one of the most unique gaming experiences I've had in my life. Now, before I continue, I do want to put a warning up here. This game is full of nonsensical imagery and flashing lights, so if you're particularly sensitive to that kind of stuff, I would say you should sit this one out. But if you're fine with that, then I welcome you to the ride. Now, normally I don't care too much about this next thing, but I think this is a special case. Cruelty Squad is definitely a game worth experiencing firsthand, and while there isn't any story to spoil, part of the sublime beauty of the game does come from the presentation and the lasting impression that it leaves. So if you don't care or can look past that, then welcome. My name is Koji, and today I want to share a little something special that I found, called Cruelty Squad. This game was a project made by Ville Kallio, a Finnish multimedia artist who is infamous for, well, this, and this, and, well, you get the picture. And Cruelty Squad is just one of their many cruel, ugly, and unholy creations. But I don't mean that in a bad way. Every single general rule of art is broken, and it makes all of their art look almost engrossing to look at. And this is the same for every aspect of this game's design. Basically, what I'm saying is that this game will age like store-brand yellow American cheese, in the sense that it won't age because it's made of plastic. So, getting into it, the game opens by showing us the protagonist. I am not sure what I expected the main character of a game called Cruelty Squad to look like, but it is comforting to know that we're playing as one of the more normal-looking characters in the game. Your phone rings, and you pick it up. Someone on the other side calls you a pathetic, unemployed mess and invites you to work at a people deletion company called Cruelty Squad, and thus bringing us to the menu. And good God, what is this? Icons are almost incomprehensible your first time, and this pig thing keeps claiming to be your boss and ordering you around. This is hideous. But it is something you'll want to get used to, seeing as pretty much everything that's not shooting is done here. You can pick weapons along with implants, which all in themselves are pretty expensive. You get money by completing missions or finding it laying around the level, or you could just play the stock market, because yes, this game has a fully functioning stock market, because why wouldn't it? You can buy stocks in companies or sell fish and organs. No, there is no other context, that's just what it is. And lastly, you can pick your missions here. There are 19 of them, only 2 of which you have access to right at the start of the game. And from there, we hop into a level. Now, under normal circumstances in any normal video, I wouldn't bother mentioning the physical controls of a game aside something from like motion controls, because every game has pretty unified and self-explanatory control schemes. But if you haven't noticed, these are not normal circumstances, and this is not a normal video, and this is about a game that goes pretty far out of its way to be as not normal as possible. So, the normal stuff. Mouse to look, left click to shoot, WASD movement, Q and E for leaning left and right, which you will never use, and then things start getting weird. X is to crouch, because it can't be C, because that swaps your weapons. How do you aim down sights? With the shift key. There's a dedicated kick button, that's F, G drops your weapon, and how do you reload, you may be asking? You know, one of the key features of any game that allows you to use a firearm. R? No, that would make too much sense, because here R is your interaction button. So what reloads, you may be asking? You hold right click and drag down with the mouse. What? The balls on this game to so horribly mess up one of the most basic and fundamentally simple parts of a first-person shooter. This game isn't even trying to reinvent the wheel, it's just flat out refusing to attach them to the car. And honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way. This game does give you the option to rebind everything, but it just doesn't feel right when swapped to a more traditional control scheme. Though I must admit that might be because I'd only just recently found out that you could use it, so the terrible default probably just grew on me. Cruelty Squad has level-based progression. You're plopped into a level with whatever 2 weapons and implants you brought in, with a few targets and little knowledge of what's happening. Each level will typically have 1 to 4 targets that you can dispatch in any way you like. This game is tagged as an immersive sim, which means it basically drops you into a playground with an objective, but doesn't have any cut-in-stone way that it wants you to go about doing it. Here in Cruelty Squad, there are 2 main ways to go about things, either loud or quiet. I've tried both, and stealth is certainly my preferred path, which surprises me considering how much I hate stealth-centric games. The targets are marked with little red crosshairs so you can see them at all times, although only sometimes because the visual clarity of the crosshairs isn't always apparent. Between you and your targets is usually a series of enemies or an environmental hazard. Now, other than the god-awful controls, the gunplay is actually quite solid, and I think the very primitive AI only adds to that. Headshots are an insta-kill no matter what, so if you mess up and alert the surrounding enemies, it will make it much harder since they'll just flail about for a bit, before stopping to shoot at you, to which their accuracy is surprisingly on point. Plus, add on how frail you are at all times, it certainly balances out. Actually, the speed at which you die really encourages tight and precise play, even though you wouldn't expect that when you're looking at this game. When one enemy can chuck you down into the red, it really forces you to pay attention to your surroundings, and even find new and creative ways to approach a situation. The missions themselves play a massive role in this too. Every single one of them gives you an incredibly large amount of options to eliminate your targets, intentional or not. Now I say that because there are some things that you can do that just don't feel like they should be allowed. And actually on that, let's talk about that real quick. On a surface level, Cruelty Squad is a very playable game. There are very few genuine bugs that I found, but this game does not restrict you in any way if you do find them. To explain what I mean, when most games have an issue or an exploit, it's abused by speedrunners for a bit before being swiftly patched out. But when you break Cruelty Squad, it looks at you dead in the eyes and says, "Harder, daddy." That being said, there is a lot that you can do to break this game. There are no invisible barriers, so if you find your way out of bounds, the game will let you. You can infinitely scale walls by using the police baton and the kick at the same time, and if that's too hard, there's an implant that does the exact same thing. You can ignore entire sections of the level by using explosives. You could even get an implant that lets you fly forever. This game is basically begging for it. Cruelty Squad's level design is actually quite brilliant in the fact that it doesn't restrict the player into any set of corridors or rooms to reach your targets, and each do feel quite unique. I had thought because of the purposefully gross art direction that levels would be separated from their layouts alone, but each is visually different from one another, and now that I think about it, the horrible art style really just adds more possibility. You just can't expect anything from a level in Cruelty Squad, which I think is something that's very hard to pull off. Now, back to where I was before my little rant. The game starts out with 2 levels open up to you, the Cruelty Squad HQ and Pharmaceutics. The HQ isn't really a level in the normal sense because you can't really complete it, it's just a set piece more than everything to get used to the controls. Pharmaceutics is the first real level. It's pretty compact compared to the rest of the game, and it will make sure that every first-time player knows this game is not going to hold your hand. There are 19 total levels in Cruelty Squad, 6 of which are secrets. The first level, Pharmaceutics, is pretty straightforward. It's mostly there to force you to get acquainted with the controls, and while I'm not going to go over every single level, I do want to point out the few that did stand out to me. Paradise takes place in a neighborhood with your targets spread out in their own individual houses, so it's not necessarily interconnected. But the different houses allow you to take on smaller micro-challenges, and it's also the first that really encourages you to explore, as many of the buildings that don't have targets in them often have healing or weapon. In fact, one of the best weapons in the game can be found in them. This level is nice as it's letting the player know that exploration is highly rewarded in Cruelty Squad. Next would be Bog Business. This is where the game really starts to open up and gives you a unique obstacle to work with. All of the water here is toxic and will poison you for about half your health anytime you make any contact with it. The only way to stop is to eat berries that are littered around the dry patches of land, But not all the berries will be the cure, as some of them will also be toxic. So for the most part, you'll be worrying about that more than the enemies, which is good since the level doesn't have that very many of them. I will say that this is certainly one of the more trial and error reliant levels, but if you explore enough in spite of that, you will be rewarded with a hazmat suit that makes you immune to the toxic environment, both in this level and in levels in the future. Apartment atrocity. The feds finally started to care about your misdeeds. Better late than never, I guess. And your target is your landlord for some reason. I don't have anything special to point out about this one. I just wanted to show off that I could beat it in less than 30 seconds. Actually, I do want to take a second to recognize the speedrun potential of this game. I mean, other than the crime to humanity that the visuals are, the game is pretty much made for speedrunners with the options that breaking this game gives you. Actually, I take that back. Archon Grid is the last non-secret level, and it's easily the most annoying, and I'm sure that's by design. The whole level takes place in an in-universe game called Gorbino's Quest, with 500 hours of mind-pumping action. And that certainly explains the obscure design of the level. Even for this game, it is a bit much. There are many paths to take, filled with moving block puzzles, and while it is fun at first, it does get really old fast when you remember that you have to do these every single time you restart. Plus, with all the enemies that are placed in annoyingly campy spots and the life-size Gorbino hunting you down all the time, it is certainly an annoying level. Now, after banging your head against the wall, you'll either end up at a dead end or this big flower thing. You can consider this the final boss of the game, although I will say it's not that hard to take down. And then we get the first of 3 possible endings. I don't really know what this is supposed to mean. I mean, it is just our protagonist Meat Boy walking down towards a wall in the distance. It's weird, but honestly, it's Cruelty Squad. I'm not sure what I expected. Now that the normal part of the game is done, now would probably be a good time to address and explain this big ugly border around the screen, because we're not done. Now, if you've been paying attention, you may have noticed that the border is not always the same. That's because it shows what difficulty you're on, because of course that's how that information is communicated to you. When you start the game, you'll have this white border. This is your divine light, or your humanity. This is the game's hard mode. There are many white doors that can only be opened when you have your divine light. However, the moment that you die, you will be told very plainly that your divine light has been severed, and that you're a flesh automaton powered by neurotransmitters. Okay. This brings us to normal mode. This is about the game's standard difficulty. The border is this mechanical, fleshy looking thing. There are no special features to this, but if you die too many times in a single level, then your feelings will be dulled and you'll be put on a new experimental respawning method because you're hoarding all of your company's resources. Power in Misery is the name of this difficulty, which is basically the game's easy mode. The border is just this really gross, fleshy stuff, and enemies deal much less damage, and you do have the ability to heal on the go, 1 point at a time, by eating corpses. Anyway, the final and hardest difficulty is Hope Eradicated. The black and blue border should give it away. And here, a new target is added to each level. More enemies are added in general, and some of the existing enemies have been given modifiers. You also have the ability to open up these cursed doors, which are your gates into the more difficult content. Now, why would I bring this up now, so far into the video? Well, it's because it hasn't been important yet. But you do need to have access to Hope Eradicated to get the other endings. So, back in Cruelty Squad HQ, the seemingly pointless tutorial level from the beginning of the game, there is a cursed door that reveals a huge chunk of the level. Now, there are many ways to unlock Hope Eradicated, but honestly, the most useful way is to go into Paradise with your Divine Light and open a white door hidden within the level. But you won't be able to see anything down here. That's because you need to go into the police station to find one tucked away enemy that holds a flashlight. Then you need to take that flashlight and then bring it back into paradise to open the door and then find the cursed torch implant, which will activate Hope Eradicated. Then after all that, you need to make sure you don't die from the radiation within the new chunk of the level, so you need to go back to pharmaceutics to open this somewhat hidden door, to open another cursed door to get the death surgery. Yes, death surgery. That is an oxymoron if I've ever heard one. And now that you're impervious to radiation and can wall jump, because those two things are definitely related, you can go into the new area, find the target who fights back using a DNA splicer, as if our DNA wasn't already spliced to all hell at this point. This can be pretty frustrating. I found that the best way is to use the animal tranquilizer dart gun to put him to sleep, and then just go ham with any weapon of your choice. After he's down, a door opens up, and... Huh. Now, it pains me to say this, but it only gets weirder from here. There are 5 secret levels, 4 of which can be found in paintings hidden around the other levels, Super Mario 64 style, and 1 is a house that you buy for $1 million. Insert joke about housing market here. The first of which is a snow lodge. It's kinda whatever, it's nothing particularly special. And then there is the Dark World, which is, well, dark. It's certainly fun to explore, though because of its central gimmick being darkness, it is one of the more straightforward levels in the game. There are night vision goggles somewhere in the level to free up one of your weapon slots, since you need a flashlight to navigate here. Though, since this is the only level in the game that really requires an external light source, it's pretty much useless unless you're planning on tackling this at higher difficulties just for the hell of it, so it's kind of pointless. Next is the nightclub, which is kinda meh, but there is $1 million hidden in here, in the bank area in some little crevice of the level, and that will let you pay for the house level. Miner's Miracle is one that definitely gave me the chills. The last 3 levels were pretty boring compared to the rest of the game, simply because they're just really normal compared to what we already came from, but this one got me. There is a part in the map where the camera changes perspective to show a sniper looking down at you, but no matter where you look, a sniper will never be there. And there's also this set of flesh rooms, and there's this weird groaning all the time. It's very strange, and I don't like to revisit this level too often. And then there's being a homeowner. The house level is honestly one of the more genuinely nice looking levels. It really feels that the weird visuals give us a really nice looking level, though there are these giant worms that loom over you called the Trigons. If you take them down, they do give you really powerful weapons and implants, though they don't respawn, and the townspeople talk about them like they're gods. And then, after all of that, there is Trauma Loop. Once you've beaten every single level on any difficulty, Trauma Loop becomes available. It's the last mission in the game and easily one of the most convoluted and challenging. Trauma Loop is the only mission where there is no target. In fact, without prior knowledge or an hour of mindlessly roaming around, you'll likely not know what you're supposed to be doing, which would be cool as a fun exploration level if it didn't throw everything but the kitchen sink at you. This is easily the hardest level in Cruelty Squad, a lot in part due to the fact that upon entering the level, all of your implants are stripped away. So if you were like me and used the ammunition gland the whole game to avoid the dumb frickin' reload, then you won't really like this. There is an enemy somewhere in this level that allows you to bring your implants in, but honestly, I think it's trivialized once you have them. The level is still incredibly hard, don't get me wrong, but part of that was not having your implants. Now, since the game doesn't tell you what to do, I'll go ahead and do so. The goal is to reach this big glowing ball somewhere at the bottom of the stage. Your best bet is really just to gun it, as there are too many armored enemies down here for you to realistically deal with, and once you're at the end, you have officially been Cruelty Squad. And this is what the game rewards you with. This game, it's surreal, and if I'm being honest, I think that objectively it fails as a video game. But I also don't think that's what it was trying to be. I think that Cruelty Squad is just trying to be a piece of art. I was talking to someone the other day about whether or not video games were considered an art form. While we both agreed it was, he used God of War Ragnarok as his example. But for me, it was Cruelty Squad. For as weird and ugly and unintuitive as this game is, I think it's one of the best examples of video games as an art form. And for that, I understand why I kept coming back to this game in the Steam store. But with all the things that's happened, I do want to say one thing that really stuck out to me. And that was how some NPCs just don't respawn. It may seem a bit weird to point that out, but when you look at the game, one thing that it continues to remind you of is just how meaningless death has become in this world. When you take out a target, no one blinks an eye because death is nothing more than an inconvenience. It's cheap to avoid, and that's why when you replay a level, no matter how many times you eliminate the target or some random bystander, they always come back. And that makes certain NPCs just choosing not to respawn stick out. Like they wanted to stay dead. It's weird. Thank you all so much for joining me on this journey. It certainly has been a ride. And if you haven't already, it would mean the world to me if you liked, commented, and subscribed to let me know your thoughts on the game and if you'd like to see more content like this in the future. And with all that, I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see you all in the next video. Psych! There's more. You thought we were done? No, you stupid frickin' weasel. Because there's a punishment mode and chaos mode, which adds more enemies, more targets, and makes you go through even more stupid with literally no reward for doing so. So if you're into self-imposed torture, then go do that. Now get out of here.